Hey guys, Niclas here from Your Audio Solutions. Awesome to have you here this week again. This week we have Phil Eck, the record producer based in Seattle. He has done work with Bill to Spill, Fleet Foxes, Band of Horses, The Shins, and many other cool bands. I think you're gonna love this conversation with Phil. It was a pleasure talking to him. As I said, he's based in Seattle, and we talked about his approach to producing, working with Bill to Spill, Fleet Foxes, work-life balance, money, how to charge clients, working with the management he has now, the GPS management. And if you want to check out the interview I did with the GPS management owner, Jeremiah Grabber, that's on a few episodes back. Check it out. Some really cool tips on how to charge clients and find clients in that episode. So check that out. And a fun fact for any Swedish listeners out there, Phil's name, Ek, is obviously Swedish, and I got to ask him if it was, and it is. He has some connection to Sweden on his family, so that's a fun fact for you. But before we get into the interview with Phil, I want to tell you about a free guide you can download right away. It's called 3 Tested Ways to Increase Your Client Base. So if you're a home studio owner, freelancer, and you want to increase your client base for your studio or just your career in general, this guide is for you. In this guide, you can learn my tested email script, how to contact bands online, how to build relationship with people in the industry, how to get your foot in the door, and how to earn more money using or charging based on value rather than time, which many of us in the music industry does. So check that out. It's free. Link is below. I think you're going to love it. But now over to Phil. Well, first of all, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
How you been doing? You're in Seattle, right?
Yes, yeah. And you're in London?
London, yeah, correct, man.
Nice.
Let's turn my headphones up a bit. Actually, I want to start this interview off because I was listening to one of your old records by Bill to Spill.
Yeah.
There's Nothing Wrong with Love. And it's very, very raw sounding record. So yeah, I'm just very curious as to how it was recording the album because it sounds very, as I said, raw. There's just an amp there. He's playing his heart out. There's a few mics up. Is that how you did that record?
Kind of. I mean, I was 22 years old when I made that record,
Wow.
and Doug was 24, and we were in a small studio in Seattle called John and Stu's Place, and that was the very first record I ever worked on. Where, we went in and there was drums and bass and Doug, and we're setting up, and we got drum sounds and bass sounds, and he just kind of said, "Oh, just throw a mic on my guitar and don't really pay attention to it because I'm going to overdub everything." And at that point in time in my recording career, you just recorded everybody live and captured as much as you possibly could live. So that was the very first record I worked on where we didn't do that. He just played scratch guitar and then overdubbed every other guitar on top of that. So it was just a matter of, building things up from bass and drums. All the overdubs were done, just playing all those parts and I think looking back, it seemed like we did it so quickly, but at the time, it just felt like we took forever on that record. Like I think we worked 2.5 weeks or so, 3 weeks maybe, recording and mixing that record.
Wow. Okay.
And that was something that I was not accustomed to at all. That was a luxurious amount of time to make a record at that point.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you said you were 22 when you started.
I was 19 when I started making records. Right. When I was 22 when I made that record.
Right. Do you think it was beneficial for you to start that early in the music industry?
Yeah. I was lucky that I got in right out of high school doing recordings and here in Seattle right before any digital medium was really around. So bands would come into studios to do demos or do anything, singles or full albums. So I was busy all the time, and I just got you got really good at just tracking efficiently. And a lot just because bands didn't record themselves really at all at that time.
Right, yeah. Like today, I guess.
Like today, yeah.
Yeah. Because what were some of your early struggles breaking into the industry, if you had any struggles?
I was really lucky that I didn't have that many. I went to the Art Institute of Seattle and did a recording program there. It wasn't very good, but the teachers were really, really nice, and I got a chance to work with them outside of the school doing their projects, kind of assisting engineering or even just engineering with them. Learned a ton about how to manage records and work on records just by being a fly on the wall. And in doing that, one of the teachers introduced me to Jack Endino, who's a very famous, like the grunge producer of Seattle. And he was kind enough to let me assist him. And I worked with him for, I don't know, about 2 years, as well as this guy, Rich Hinklen, who owned the studio at the time. And I worked with those guys, assisting their records. And if anybody who didn't ask to work with them wanted to record, they got me. So I did a lot of demos. Yeah, a lot of demos.
Yeah. So what did you learn from assisting him?
And I probably learned more. The best thing I learned from Jack is just how to deal with any issue that arose, how to deal with a technical problem, how to deal with a band argument or a singer who's having a hard time singing in key, how to guide a performance, how to guide a record, and just being a fly on the wall, which is mostly what I did, set up microphones and things like that. It was really great to be able to just see him, help an artist understand what they're not doing correctly and how to get them to feel good about doing it better and build them up and understand that it's no problem that you're not performing great right now. We'll get there and I'll show you how. And that was really, really imperative to how I became a record producer.
Yeah, of course. I mean, could you give us some tips maybe on how, let's say if a band is struggling to get a good take, what are some of the things we can do to help them get a good take, for example?
Well, I think it's just to release the pressure. Just talk to them, let them know that it's not a big deal. It happens. And if we don't get it right now, we will. And maybe we should stop working on this drum song right now, maybe do some bass guitar, or let's just try a whole different song altogether and just put this one on the back burner and we'll come back to it. Once you get a couple underneath your belt, you'll feel comfortable and relaxed and know that it sounds good and know that it's not, a difficult process, that you just have to be able to, it's okay to fuck up. And in doing so, you learn how to be better and play better and sing better and just become more comfortable in the process of making records, because there's stressful things that bands don't do that often. And I do them all the time. So it's letting people understand that it happens and it's okay to have a rough patch and that it will go away.
But do you think that has become less nowadays because everyone are so used to record themselves, mostly, I guess? Do you think that has gone away a bit, or is still
half and half? I think it's really good that artists understand the recording process more than they used to when they didn't record themselves all the time. But also there's a downside where bands maybe are doing things maybe not always to the best of their ability, performance-wise, because they can manipulate them so much more after the fact. Either that's tuning a lot or editing themselves a lot, whereas it will just sound better and be a lot cooler and more genuine and more like what they're trying to sound like or trying to emulate from records that they've heard in the past, if they just perform it better and sing it better or to play the guitar part more in time or stronger drum track or whatever. So it kind of goes both ways. But I think bands knowing how to make records on their own or understanding the process of microphone placements or effects that they've messed around with that they really like, there's a lot of help in that for sure. For sure.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
And let's say if a singer is struggling to sing a tune, is there any cool tips you can do to combat that and make it easier for the singer?
Oh, I'm a big fan of an artist just constantly singing. They should be playing guitar, acoustics, and just always being in practice, always being warmed up, always understand their muscle memory, where it sits in their chest, where it sits in their throat and their head, where the note is coming from. Understanding the physicality of singing will always help you understand how to hit notes clearer, much more properly and more effectively. As well as I'm a big fan of artists using vocal coaches just to learn breathing techniques and things that a lot of guys start writing songs just on their own and pick up a guitar or piano or whatever it is the instrument they use and just start writing and start singing and never really have paid attention to the artistry of how to sing and be more in control of their voice, and that practice and that understanding just certain techniques of how to hold notes and where they come from are invaluable to making a great vocal performance.
Yeah. Is there any signs where you can see if an artist has come up not having learned how to sing properly?
Oh, no, I wouldn't say signs. It probably just means just how confident they are on the mic, how good they sound just being in front of a microphone with headphones with me and the band or whoever's there kind of staring at them through glass. And, if they can perform without it feeling like they're performing. And they may be doing it incorrectly, quote unquote, but it sounds amazing. It doesn't really matter. But then there's, sometimes people sing and they start hurting their voice or hurting their throat. And that usually just means that they're doing it incorrectly and not breathing properly and certainly not drinking enough water and things to keep themselves fresh. The only real way to know if they're not doing something well is if it just doesn't sound good.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's very interesting. And I also read, sticking to the producing aspect, because I read on Sound and Sound the other day when you worked with Fleet Foxes, and how Robin Pecknold, is that how you pronounce his name? Last name? Yeah.
Pecknold,
yeah. And how he really wanted an analog sound using tapes, keeping mistakes and all that, but you were very, sensible to steer the ship the other way a bit. And I thought that was it was refreshing hearing someone like you talking about, actually the analog days were a pain. We are much better off nowadays. And talk a bit about that, like that relationship. How do you steer someone away from maybe some romanticizing thing they have about the past to what's actually better today?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I guess it just with that Fleet Foxes thing. I think tape is a lovely medium. It sounds amazing. It's certainly a pain in the ass these days, just because artists aren't accustomed to recording on that medium, and that medium is a harder thing. You can't fix as many mistakes or the issues of things that are so easy to fix in a digital land. You have to really be persistent and continuously playing at your optimal level if you're going to be doing it on tape. And so I think artists romanticize that idea, but then when they go through it, they're like, oh, this is a pain in the ass. This is really hard to do. And a band like Fleet Foxes, where they're not playing live, these are all built up, overdubbed things, that becomes stressful and time consuming, and you run into technical issues that you definitely run into these days with tape. So with Robin, it was just like, okay, that's cool that we do this, but at some point we're not going to be able to stay in this medium, and we're going to have to go to digital because we just don't have enough tracks, and we're going to need to be able to edit these things together, and we're going to have to do that at some point. And so in doing that and having some of that stuff be done in digital and have it kind of something that the artist doesn't even really notice the difference sonically because digital's so good now, it just made it a no-brainer to about halfway through the record just to kind of abandon the analog aspect and go straight into the digital world of recording and editing. So ultimately it was a fun experiment that became a pain in the ass that we just abandoned.
Yeah.
But he's smart and he understands studios enough to know that it doesn't matter that much to if you do great recording and great, have great source sound, great microphones, great preamps, the digital land sounds amazing. And certainly 15 years ago it didn't, but now it definitely does. So it's less of a sticking point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've only been a part of maybe one or two sessions where we used tape. I was assisting a session, it was a few years ago, but My experience was, yeah, it's a lot of there's definitely way more waiting around, which I believe can be
Mhm.
good, right? Or
Sure.
yeah, because it lets you
Yeah.
breathe a bit, I guess. Take a
Yeah.
break from the song, whatever you're doing. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Change a wheel.
yeah,
Have to
yeah,
rewind
exactly.
time. Yeah, there's something to be said about not having options, and there's something to be
Mm.
said about going to a studio and not being in your house recording at any time you want and messing around at any time you want. There's definitely an art to performances. There's definitely an art to committing to an idea, to saying this is how the song is going. We're going to go this route. We're not going to. On the tape days, you didn't really have the option to just do it all again easily. You had all this time and energy spent on this analog version of everything, and to redo it meant a huge process and expensive process.
Mm.
So the idea of going in and being prepared, being ready to perform, be ready to trust the producer and trust your songs that you're going to do a good thing. There's a lot of art in that.
Mm.
And I try very much to keep that mentality happening even in the digital world, that we're going to commit to this. We're going to commit to this idea. This is how the guitar part sounds and how it's going to be performed. And then we're going to build everything off of that. And having the artist trust that and respect that and go with that as much as we can, I always think just makes a much stronger, you know, convincing album for the listener and for the band ultimately. I think that it just shows that they're not, they're not neither here nor there. They're directly doing this thing, and I think that's something I still very much try to do in the digital world.
Right. How do you convince the band to follow that mentality with you? Do you have a conversation beforehand, or how does that
Yeah,
happen?
I try to do that as much as I can in like a pre-production discussion, when we're either in the same room doing some kind of pre-production or even just sending demos back and forth. Or I really try to instill the idea that we need to make sure that we agree with how the arrangement's going to go as much as we can before we get in the studio. Agree that this is the key of the song, that this is the length of the first chorus, or all that, and have people just feel good about it and feel good that I'm in this with them, and that when we get in the studio, we're just basically doing that.
Mm.
Things come up all the time, new ideas happen, better or worse, they get worked on. But to have people really trust that you're there because you believe in them, that you believe in their songs, believe in their art form, that you can deliver something really cool to them, and just trust that they're gonna do that as well. Then you have this idea that a collective consciousness of making cool music. So you go in with that philosophy and try to stick to it as much as, I guess, as much as the record allows that to happen.
Mm.
Given everybody has issues when they come up, or sometimes you don't realize that band members are fighting behind the scenes, and until you get into the studio, sometimes that can put things on the back burner at times. But
Right.
mostly just try to keep people focused on the plan at hand that you've talked about before you even started.
Mm. Yeah, it's very interesting, man. It's a very cool thing to be able to do. I like that approach very much,
Yeah,
actually. But how do you
yeah.
keep? Because this is maybe just my experience, but having been in sessions before, it sounds awesome while you're tracking. Maybe it's a live recording. The band is playing live. Then you hear the finished product sometimes, and they sort of lost that magic. That happened while tracking. I don't know if you've experienced that, but if so, how do you try to keep it as raw till the end? Like with
Well,
the build to spill, because that's raw till the very end, I guess.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that was just. I mean, raw is it's kind of like talking about something being lo-fi.
Right.
You don't always try to do that as
No.
much as just kind of happened. I
Mm.
think we did that record. If the first Built Spill record I did sounds raw, is because I was 22 and we were in a tiny little studio. And not that I didn't think it sounded cool then or now. I just don't know if I would have done. I couldn't have made that record that way now. You just, the more you learn about things, the more you sounds or try different approaches or different microphones or whatever. Yeah, you can't really unlearn how to make things sound maybe bigger, clearer, more modern, or whatever it is. So I don't know. I think I try to make records sound as much like an. I've had people say, "Oh, I think Fleet Foxes record sounds amazing. I love how that sounds so live and whatever." And it's not live at all. There's nothing live about it. So that's about paying attention at all times, making sure people are playing properly and that you're not just gridding everything out and making things perfect all the time. I certainly don't want it to sound like it's, speeding up, slowing down, definitely playing to click tracks, definitely editing performances and doing multiple takes and whatever, but I don't want it to feel unhuman as much as possible. I want it to feel relatable. And I think there's a good balance of making things, modern and big and in time and maybe tuned if they need to be or whatever, without it feeling sterile. And it still has energy, still has human aspects to it. So I try very much to not, instead of looping a guitar part across all the performances, perform that song, and we can edit, move around, and whatever needs to be done, but have it not completely be the exact same thing every single time. Have it have a performance aspect to it. I think that's relatable to the audience. I think it's, in my opinion, I think it just ultimately makes something feel more exciting if you hear something a little different the second chorus than you heard the first chorus, as opposed to the exact same thing all the way across. Maybe that little difference catches your ear and kind of makes you feel excited, or that different inflection in the voice draws you in and makes you feel like you're there, which I think is important. A way to listen to records as if you're kind of there, experiencing it, even though you're certainly not. It's definitely not live.
Yeah. But do you think with in the case of Fleet Foxes, when it sounds live, but you said it's not, do you think it's down to the style of the music that makes it either? Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's not dance music, it's not electronic music, it's not death metal, it's not, there's a older style quality to their records and that band that certain other bands I worked with, like maybe I don't know, Group Love or something like that, or maybe a little less of that. They are more of a, they have electronic elements that kind of dictate. You can't really be, you kind of have to be more gridded to the track. But yeah, for sure, there's definitely that kind of Beach Boysy, Nick Drake aspect of their music that just lends itself to feeling live.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
But so if you go into a studio with a new artist, what would a typical day look like for you beyond the technical part, so to speak?
Well, I guess it's probably different record to record, artist to artist, and how they feel comfortable recording. But, if you're starting a record off day one, song one, you're just setting up, getting drum sounds, and you have drum techs there to help tune things, and you're trying microphone techniques or trying out different sounds just to see what feels great. Either that is happening just something like, oh wow, I didn't expect it to sound this way, or you go in with a plan of, we're trying to get a drum sound like a 70s sound, or we're trying to get a certain style of sound. Yeah, so you just go in and do that and set everybody up. I do start records live. I do start bands as much as they feel comfortable doing so, all playing together. If it's a band like that, and try to capture as much sound as we can live, mostly just to hear the whole song all the time. And I think it's also good for a band to kind of be practicing their parts all the time. So if the bass part isn't completely dialed in, they have multiple takes to kind of mess around with their bass lines, as long as it's not messing anybody up or whatever. So I get everybody to play live, and then after we got it, I like to record a whole lot of drums, maybe even the whole album, and do multiple takes of the drums, just different playlists, and have them knowing that they're in time, knowing that they're cool, writing down what great fills are happening out of the first chorus, or write down all these different ideas. And then I don't edit it right away. I just let it sit and just kind of keep it fun so that we're not stopping all the time and editing the drums, and the band gets bored, they get tired, and they want to go home, or they want to go to a bar or something. They don't. I kind of keep everybody interested at all times so that we're constantly recording and having fun and working on stuff, and the entire time knowing that what we're doing is good. And then, then after I do all the drums, I'll probably edit those to a rough point so that they're not, there's no mistakes, or we get all the cool performances we want on one major playlist, and then we'll do bass, and then we'll do guitars and build it from there, depending on the songs or depending on the band. Like when I worked with Bands of Joy, we started that way. It was Edwin was playing drums, and James was playing some guitar. And it was just those two guys, and it wasn't working at all. It just didn't. The drums weren't really sounding very good. He didn't really have a part 100%. And he goes, well, yeah, I would much prefer if James, the singer guitar player, if he just did his guitar first to a click, and then we'll just build everything up from there. And great, whatever feels cool. So we did like a day and a half maybe of trying to do it the drums first way, and it just didn't happen. So we did guitar first, and then built all the percussions and stuff from there, and then James sang on top of that. Right. So it just depends.
Yeah, that's very cool, man.
Yeah.
How do you keep the band not interested? Because hopefully they are interested because they're recording.
Yes,
but how do you keep the spirits high when you can feel it's maybe lacking a bit?
I try to be funny. I try to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
I just try to. You try to make it. I try as much as I can to be open and honest if something isn't working, and not butter the band up or not kiss their ass, but not be harsh. I try to explain, hey, this isn't working for whatever reason. Like I said before, it doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. Or here's ways we could try to figure it out and make it better. And let's try it again. If it's not working, let's try a different thing. Let's do some tambourine parts, or let's do backwards guitar solos, or whatever will make it enjoyable and lighthearted, but still exciting, and just ease the tension so that we can just move on to another, another aspect of the record that's just positive, and using those parts that positive to get great performances and parts that we can use, so that we're always moving forward, not stuck on some idea that is dragging you down for hours and hours as much as you can.
Right,
I think that's the best way to do it.
Right. And has it been, or actually my question is, in all your years of producing now, what has been your hardest decision you had to make as a producer?
Oof. I've had situations where I've had to be a part of band members being removed from the band or removed from the recording process. That's never fun. It doesn't happen often, but it has happened where someone isn't playing to their abilities, either aren't practiced well enough, or maybe have drug or alcohol issues that are hampering their ability to play and to the level that we need them to play, and it's an unhealthy situation for everybody. So that's certainly probably the hardest, is having conversations that aren't music, that are affecting the music, the humanity part of it, where it's just someone's having a hard time for whatever reason, and we have to stop, or they have to be removed, or whatever. I certainly can't fire somebody, but I can talk with the artist, talk with the singer and the guitar player, whoever, other members of the band, about what maybe is the best way to approach something that's not working. That's probably the hardest part. Thankfully, it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen.
Yeah, I heard something when I interviewed Sylvia Massey last year, I think. She said a similar thing like you, where she had to remove someone, a drummer, from the session just because of the label. The label wanted another drummer, basically. But yeah, it sounded similar to you, so I'm glad I haven't experienced that.
Yeah. It's not a fun thing to go through.
No, I can imagine. But so, I know you recently signed with GPS Management, right?
Yeah.
So up to this point, were you always a freelancer, or did you have other management?
I had other management. It was Moyer Entertainment. This guy Steve Moyer and his faculty, I guess you could say. I was with him for almost 16 years, up until just this last June when I signed the GPS.
Wow.
And so he was invaluable to me. He was a very, very important person in helping me have a large connection with labels and bands that I certainly wouldn't have been in contact with without having been associated with him. Just came time to try something different. I met up with Jeremiah and went with him, who you've worked with or interviewed as well.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. I really like
Exactly.
him a lot.
Yeah, he's
So
awesome.
it's been extremely positive and really cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Was it when before you had management? What was your process or maybe technique, whatever word is suitable, to find new clients for your studio or your career,
Before
basically?
before I had management,
Yeah.
it was just word of mouth. Everybody, you do a record and maybe that band went on tour with a band and we love the Built Spill record. You worked with Phil. How's it like working with Phil? They give you your email address or your phone number, and you just get calls from multiple like-minded artists. It usually would go pretty organically like that. Sometimes labels would call me up, or like Sub Pop would call me up and ask me if I'd be interested in working with a certain artist or whatever. But it was really just grassroots people knowing who you were and calling you or meeting you at a show or emailing you and just asking if you'd be interested in working on their projects, and send you demos and you listen to them. You like it, you just get back in contact with them and go from there.
But was that a slow burner, so to speak? Like, I assume you didn't start out with a
Yeah.
lot of word of mouth clients. So
No, it really started because I worked at the studio with Jack and Dino and Rich Hinklin's place called Word of Mouth Studios, and I just did tons of demos. Every cold call 2-day 4-song demo for a band to get a show at a club. And in doing that, met a lot of artists who that band broke up and they started a new band. They go, oh, let's call Phil again. And that really grew from just being around and being in studios and always doing demos and always just being in the studio and meeting people at shows and going to local shows in town. And so that's how that grew. And then stuff like Built Spill happened, and it was a big success for both of us. And because of that record, I got a lot of people inquiring me like, hey, would you do our band? Would you do our band? And that's definitely how it grew. It was certainly that record that transition from just being a kid in Seattle doing local bands and any project that came down the line to people requesting to work with me and calling me, and that grew pretty substantially after that record, for sure.
right. And what are your thoughts on like networking, building relationships? How valuable is that to increase your client base, for example?
Awesome. And completely invaluable. You definitely need to be, people need to know who you are, and you need to be in people's ear at all times, especially these days, because there's so much competition to make records. People just need to know how to find you, and you need to know what you've worked on, and they don't always know that you did a record for Bears Den, or whomever, that a band that is quite, does quite well in Europe and does okay here. But having people know about that I produced that record in Europe is a very important thing. And you also just need to you have to make really quality work. At all times, do your best work. And I think for me, that's always been a part of records that I believe in. I tried my hardest to choose records or have records come to me that make sense for me to be a part of, that I love. And that could be a band like Bears Den or Smoke Fairies, bands like that from England, or my buddy's band called Big Business, like super heavy, distorted, loud rock and roll band. Just that I like it, that I really believe in it. So if you believe in it, that translates to a good record. That's going to translate to people going, that's someone that they want to talk to. So
Yeah.
Always having those relationships with management and knowing people who work at labels and different other band management, just knowing everybody and being genuine in your interest in working with them and knowing them speaks volumes to you as a producer, as someone they trust, that they want to work with, that they think has the right attitude and the right energy towards projects that they want to hire you for. So it's very important that you just be genuine and stay in the public eye, and the people who do make decisions to have you produce their album or mix it or whatever it is, that they just know how to get a hold of you, and that they you're not full of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And how has having a manager or management helped you in that aspect? Did it elevate it a lot, or was it also like a slow burner maybe?
Both. I mean, I did records that were successful with management that they didn't really have anything to do with. They didn't have, like, my old management really didn't have any connection to Fleet Fox as I did. So that was something that I brought in. But I've had many times where a band or whomever that I don't know at all, that I've never even met. I asked my manager, "Hey, what about the Walkman? I've never met the Walkman before, and I love their band." And he goes, "Oh, I'll totally reach out to them," and I made a record with them because of that. Or the Black Angels, or things that I really just said, "What's going on with this band?" And they, because I don't know these bands, and they know their manager or they know the label person, they call them up and say, "Hey, Phil's interested," or vice versa. The labels, contact my management and say, the band's interested in working with Phil. And like with Bearsden, I had never met them ever, and wasn't really familiar with them at all. And they contacted my management, and then they sent me demos, and we went on from there. So it's both sides. You have to be, as a producer, you need to be able to bring in projects that are something you believe in or are excited about, and do legwork on your own. But having people who live in a different city, who deal with different label executives that you don't even have any relationship with directly much at all, they have those conversations. They ask what's going on. They maybe signed a brand new artist that's no one's even heard before, and they brought them into their label, and having someone talking on your behalf to those people and getting your name in their psyche of possibilities is extremely important to have options. That's what the biggest part about making records these days is having options and having people know that you're available, and how to contact you, and knowing that you're represented by GPS management, and that if they contact Jeremiah, he has a direct connection to me. So it's very important. And it can be fast, or it can be slow. It could be really busy and lots of projects coming in, or it could be slow and things take a while to set up. It's take a long time for all the boxes to be checked and everybody sign off on it, and when you're going to do it and how you're going to do it and how much time you're going to get to do it and how much money the budget will allow you to do it. That takes a while to set up. So having people helping you do that is really important. The business of music is very good to have those helpful people on your side.
Yeah, for sure, man. And when it is slow, or if you have experienced any slow time, so to speak, how do you handle those times?
You just the best thing to do, and the best thing that I like about Jeremiah right now, is something that wasn't really as well. It was there in my old match, but he's really into me just always texting him things I'm into, like a band I just heard on the radio. Send him a text, "Hey, what's going on with that band?" Or a band I had worked with 3 years prior, and wanted to reconnect with. Reach out and see what they're doing. It's always about making sure you just kind of keep your options open, and send out little flyers. "Hey, I'm interested. What are you guys up to? What's going on?" And sometimes they were going to contact you anyway. Sometimes like, "Oh yeah, it's cool. We hadn't thought about working with you. We were thinking about doing it ourselves," or whatever. So having people, keeping yourself excited, knowing that it's not always going to be slow, that there's ebbs and flows in the music business, and maybe rock and roll is cool yesterday, but it's dumb now. And how do you want to dive into doing electronic music or not, or is that something you're interested in, or being open to do that? I think it's also important that you let people be aware that just because you did a Fleet Foxes record doesn't mean that's all you do.
Right.
You have to look at the whole discography and let people understand that those conversations can go in a million different ways. And a good producer, I feel, just has to really love all kinds of music and be able to understand that helps you make great records no matter what kind of band it is.
Yeah.
So that's the most important thing.
That's very interesting, man. And that's kind of cool that you have those sort of conversations. So that would take place with Jeremiah then, like, for example, oh, maybe you should look into doing another genre, or have you thought about this stuff?
Yeah.
Cool.
Or me as well. Just saying, I like that, whatever, fill in the blank band or thing, and like that's cool. I think that's sometimes those artists, you get known for doing whatever records you've done that have been successful. People really just kind of only know about those records, and making sure people understand that I've done a lot of other kinds of records, and that I'm open to doing a lot of different kinds of records and like lots of different kinds of music. That conversation is really important, because if you don't reach out to them, they might just think you're not someone that they would want to work with, or you wouldn't want to work with them.
Right.
And it's very important that they know that you would.
So how do you start a conversation with a band like that? Is it through you, or is it through Jeremiah?
I guess if I don't know the band at all, if I've never met them in my life and I don't know their manager, or never met their manager before, or things like that, it would definitely be through Jeremiah. I would email him or contact him in some way and just say, could you reach out to this artist? I like their songs. I like what they're doing, or I have liked their old records. What are they doing now? I would definitely leave it up to somebody to, the kind of like nice protocol is to have a professional reach out on your behalf and show intent. And then if they go, oh, great, maybe we can get him on the phone together, or maybe the band's going to be in town next week and he can go see him play and have a drink with him. That's generally how the kind of ebb and flow goes in the initial conversations. Yeah. If it's not, someone has reached out to me directly through either Jeremiah or through my website, that hasn't happened. It usually would be through management to kind of connect those dots first.
That's cool. Yeah. That makes sense. So if you do, let's say Jeremiah reaches out to a new band for you and gets you in touch with a new artist or a band, what have you found? What do you feel is the best way to trying to take it from that step to actually becoming a client? Do you try to build a relationship with them first, or do you try to do like a hard sell, like, hey, come work with me?
Usually if you're having a conversation with an artist, if they want to get on the phone with you, or if they want to meet you, there's usually already intent to want to work with you. They like your records you've done. They know something about you. They've listened to records you've done, or listened to records you've mixed or produced. And so there's usually not a cold situation. There's usually a little bit of interest happening already. So it just goes however it goes. If a band wants to talk to you about how do you make records, and you just do kind of like the same thing here, we just discuss how you produce things. You do that. Or if I've worked with bands where like, you don't have to tell me anything. I think your records are cool. We would love to do this with you, and we want to do it in November. Can you do it in November? We think we have this amount of money. Can that work, kind of thing. And sometimes it's very quick like that.
Cool. So, yeah. Makes sense. And talking about money, when it comes to rates and stuff, that's something, do you discuss that with the client, or that's also something you have already defined with Jeremiah, for example?
It depends. I mean, to be a producer, to do records you really believe in, it means you're doing all sizes of records. You're doing small bands to larger bands. And to say that I have a set fee is just kind of, it's not true. I want to be, everybody wants to get paid as much as they can get paid, I suppose. But I want to do records that are cool, that I believe in, and that sometimes means they have way less money. And so if usually the conversation starts, do you like my band? Do you like my new demos? Are you interested in recording wherever we live, or are they cool coming to Seattle to work here? You get to that point, then you kind of have to figure out, well, how much money do you have, and then what can we do, and what's fair? and what's going to make the record the best. If it means I get a little less money, but we can spend more time on it, and it's going to make a greater record, then we'll do that. Or we'll figure out a publishing kind of arrangement, or we'll figure out a points arrangement. If you don't have the money up front, maybe we can work on a bigger back end payment so that it works out fairly for everybody if the record's a success. And that money talk and that kind of contract talk is almost always with the management, with the label, and maybe my lawyer, the band's lawyer, gets involved if we need to do a long form contract before we go in. That kind of depends on the label, I guess, and the management and whatever their comfort zones are for a final agreement. But money talk is best left for your management to talk. It's not usually the best for the artist and the producer to start talking about money, because this going to be weird. So
yeah, exactly.
That's definitely for the management folks to deal with.
Yeah. So if a band does reach out to you personally and say, "Hey, we love your work. We want to do the next record with you," would your first question be, "What's your budget?" Or would you?
No, my first question would be, "Do you have new songs you could play me?"
Cool.
If I had heard their record, if I knew of the band before, I would go, "Oh, cool, yeah, I your last record is really great." But if I would still ask to hear their new demos, but especially I just wanted, "Hey, do you have songs I can hear?" Because it only makes sense if I know what you're doing. If bands change, sometimes they go in a new direction. If you only go by what they've done before, they might send you new songs that are just not your thing. You don't get it, or they went really heavy rock out of nowhere or something like that, or whatever their scenario is. So it really just depends. But yeah, I always ask to hear their song probably first, just to hear what they're up to, and then go from there.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good first question, actually, to build a relationship rather than just talk money straight away, I guess.
I mean, sometimes there's that. If it's a real cold email, just to my websites, I'll say, "Hey, these are my broad questions. Are you on a label? What is your timeline? Do you have demos you can send me? Are you able to travel? Are you not able to travel?" Really broad questions. And I'll usually often say, "What do you have a budget? Do you know what that would be yet? Or do you not know yet?" Sometimes bands don't quite know what their labels or even themselves have to pay or they can pay for any given record. So, excuse me. So it's just broad questions first, and then go from there. And sometimes, bands, they have no idea what their budget's going to be, but they can say some demos, and you go, "Oh, this is really cool," and you'll work out a deal, and you make the record. Sometimes they just simply don't have any money at all, and it's just not feasible to go in and do anything with them, because there's still lodging costs, and there's still travel costs, and on top of a fee for me, or on top of a fee for a studio, or whatever we're doing. So sometimes there's bands you want to work with, and you just can't make it work, unfortunately, because it's just too low, or they hadn't maybe thought about certain costs that they weren't prepared to be paying for, whatever that is, rentals, or renting, whatever it would be, buying more drum heads, or just the cost of being in the studio can add up. So it depends.
I don't know how it is in US, but definitely here in London, it seems like mostly all producers are working out of their own studio nowadays, because there is obviously less money. Even though we keep hearing there's never been as much money in the music industry. Is that something you noticed? Have you noticed more money coming in? Have you noticed?
Yeah, I have seen more money coming in the sense that 2005, 2006, when it was rampant illegal downloading and money just hemorrhaging out of the music business. It's not like that anymore. But there have been some labels have been able to offer more of a budget to allow more time in the studio and things like that. Most people have all their space, have their own studios, just because there's so many smaller bands that just can't afford to go in the studio that you want to work with, but you can't go to a nicer big facility, so you have to do stuff in a smaller space. I still don't have my own studio. The main reason, main reason is because I live in Seattle and I have such a good relationship with all the owners of these studios, and they're still quite cheap. That's probably not going to always be the case. I'll probably build a mixing facility of my own just to be able to mix stuff outside of a studio scenario. But I still think, it's still because it's still fairly cheaper to make records here in Seattle than other places, LA, certainly London, that allows me to still not have to have a big recording space. Also, having been making records for 30 years, to make a recording studio now would be kind of an expensive bummer because I'd want a big room and I'd want a beautiful board and I'd want all the things that are just extremely expensive that, I just don't want to pay for.
Yeah.
But it's also, I also think there's some, I guess going back to another thing I said before, I think there's a lot of importance in the value in spending. There's money in spending money, or the value in spending money. I'm sorry. There's something important about going somewhere, knowing you have this amount of time and this amount of money, and you have to go and do it, and that you can't work on it for months and months and months and never really have a deadline. You go in, you record, you make something happen in the time frame that your budget allows. Often it's the same as like when people made records on tape, you committing to something and knowing you have to do something now. There's value in that. There's art in that. So I still really like that aspect, but I'll definitely build a mix facility of my own at some point here, probably in the next year, I bet, just to save some money and make it easier to work with some smaller bands if they want me just to mix, but they don't have enough money to go someplace where to mix on a board or whatever we're going to do.
So now you actually rent a studio every time you need to mix or record or I see.
I do.
That's kind of cool.
I do. Yeah, I know it's kind of weird, but I still do it.
Yeah.
I think it sounds great. I think mixing on a board. I mean, I mix in a box and on a board, basically at the same time. Like pretty much all effects are coming from Pro Tools, and lots of plugins are still happening in Pro Tools. But I still like the sound of signal going through an analog board with analog EQs and getting it to kind of do its thing in the analog aspect, but all digital recording. So it's kind of half and half.
Right.
But I just like the way it sounds.
Yeah. But it's cool that you can still do that actually.
Yeah. I think those days are limited, but I still do it. Yeah.
That's nice, man. So shifting topic a bit. So work-life balance. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have work-life balance? For a better question.
I do now. I think I'm married to my wife. We've been together 7 years, and
congratulations.
Work-life balance is extremely important, and I definitely had a relationship fall apart by me being in the studio 12 hours a day, 6-7 days a week for 2 months, or whatever. So that's not always gonna. I mean, I think that's not always the case every record, but that's never really going to change because that's how records are made. They take a lot of your time, and I think the only way to have a healthy work-life balance is to be with someone who understands that. Also, let them know that when you're not in the studio, it's a balance. When you're making a record for 2 months straight or thereabouts, that's what that's going to be. But maybe you'll have a month off after that, and that's how that's going to be. So it really is getting quality time with the person in your life and being respectful of them and their concerns, and have them being respectful of yours, and making sure that you do spend time for yourself, and that you're not always working, that you are having your relationship with your spouse and your friends and your family, and not just dropping off the face of the planet over and over and over again, because it's not a healthy way to just live. I mean, certainly when I was 20, 21, 22, 3 years old, didn't matter, but now that I'm 48, it does matter. And so I think this being in all aspects of record making, and all aspects of relationships with bands, and your family, and your relationship with your wife or husband or whatever it is having open communication about everything at all times will always make it better. So that's what I try to do as much as possible.
Yeah. But why do you think, I always wonder that with the recording industry, why why it's always not always, but like usually it's 12 to 14-hour days every
Hmm.
day. Why do you
Hmm.
think that is? Has it always been like that?
Well, it's always been like that since I've been making records. I try to work a 10-hour day at the
Mm.
longest, um, just because I think if you go too much longer, you're kind of fooling yourself that you're doing good work. Sometimes
Mm.
you are. Sometimes it's something really great's happening at 11 o'clock at night that wasn't happening at noon. Um, but I try not to work too hard because you just burn out so hard, and you can't have the longevity of that just can't happen. You'll just by the couple of weeks in, you're just dead, and you start being grumpy, and people make bad decisions or fight, or it's just not a healthy way to be artistic. But the main reasons that it's a 10, 12, 14 hour day is because it takes forever. What if you good performances, the good sounds, and all that goes into making a cool record take a hell of a lot longer than people realize. And if
Mm.
you ever just been a fly on the wall hanging out in a room or going and seeing your buddy record and you know how to make records, but you'll sit there for 3 hours, this is the most boring thing in the world, but they're still working on that guitar part. They're still in it. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
And I think this is the aspect of performances and playing well and playing consistently. And you did it that one way, that one time, it was really good. You got to do it again, and fuck, and whatever. That just takes forever. So
Yeah.
just the process of being creative is not a fast one at times.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I think that was one of the big shocks for me when I first started out assisting people in studios here in London. That, like you said, like it's not something you really learn when you start out. This is something you experience, I guess, as you go on. But it's interesting,
Yeah.
and also a lot of fear. I don't know if this is something you have noticed, but I've seen a lot of fear in studios. Like that's also why I wonder. Maybe that's why people work so long because there's a lot of fear of failure. Maybe you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. Yeah, and it's hard. It's a hard, stressful thing to be. In the hot seat, you got to perform. You got to be good. You got to be at your ultimate best at all times. And are you doing? The back of the mind of the artist is always: am I doing the best thing I can do? Is it sound the coolest? Is this the coolest idea?
Mm.
Is this the best version of this song I wrote maybe a year and a half ago? Is
Mm.
this the best thing? Am I treating this the best it can be treated? No matter what the producer says, no matter what their best friend, who's the guitar player, says, or everybody's on edge, and they're afraid of fucking that up and
Mm.
not doing their best that they can do. So it's the job of the producer at all times to relieve that stress as much as you can. Certainly that means there's times we have to stop and talk about it, and that can take an hour and a half or 2 hours, or maybe, okay, let's go get some food and we'll come back to this, and that's a 2 hour break or whatever.
Mm.
So yeah, there's always tension in making records, and that's good tension. I mean, that's good anxiety, as long as it's not destructive and slowing everything down to the point of it not getting done. But that feeling of weight, the feeling of that what you're doing has weight and has history to it. I mean, these records aren't going away. A good show comes and goes, and people talk about it. You may love your band, but that came and went. And the best thing a band could ever do, or any artist could ever do, is write the greatest song they have the capacity to write. And the second best thing they could do is make the best record and best version of that they could do. So yeah, there's a lot of fear in that, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of worry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you're right, man. There is. And yeah, like you said, producer's job is to deal with that, I guess.
yeah, I think it's completely the job of the producer to deal with that, and the job of the producer to have good, hard conversations. Whether that's hard, like this isn't working,
Mm.
you need to practice more, or hard that, hey man, it's going to be okay. I pat him up, everyone on the back. You're good. We're here because you're good.
Mm.
Whoever they are, the bass player, the keyboard player, the singer, whoever that is, let them know they're good. They're going to be fine.
Mm.
And if it's for whatever reason it's not working, explain why, and have them understand that, listen to you, do it a new way or a more relaxed way or even a totally different technical way, different voicing of a chord or, sing it harder, sing it softer, sing it longer, sing it whatever way that makes it go, yes, this is great. And have them respect that and understand that and believe you, hear the results when they've done it and move on. That's how you make great records. And that to me is the most important part about producing.
Yeah, well said, man. I agree. So maybe this is a random question, but do you have any favorite failure that happened in your career? Something that set you up for later success?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know. I think I try to forget those ones.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you're always kind of failing at something. You're always, every time you go in the studio, you're always trying to do something better than you've done before. So I guess in some ways, you in your mind, you failed a little bit. Like I didn't get the greatest drum sound I wanted for some reason. I'm going to make sure I pay attention to whatever that is more the next time you go in the studio. I think you're always, at least I'm always thinking about what I didn't like about the last thing I did. And that could be an extremely small, very personal thing that no one's ever going to pay attention to except for me. Mm-hmm. But I remember it. And I think those little things are always what you're always striving to be better at, is kind of all of it. Always try to make a more efficient record, try to make a more fun record, try to make a more exciting record, try to make a better sounding record, try to whatever that new thing that you're trying to pay attention to, try to make that better at all times. So I think I'm always failing in some respect, right. and trying to make it better.
Yeah,
trying to make myself better. So I can't say there's one specific thing,
right?
But yeah, I think the more I do this, the more records I have under my belt. I think going in with even more communication is key, and making sure that there's no surprises, or the least amount of surprises there can be, so that you're always, the artist always knows what's going on. They always understand why you're doing what you're doing. They know what they need to do. There's no question marks. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned over the years of making records, to always be communicating everything, making sure that what's expected of this process is not, there's no gray area in that there's a collective consciousness that we're all in this together and that we all know how to do it. And I don't know, it's kind of a hard thing to describe, but just being able to be one with the process with everybody, and having it be a communication forward of that makes everybody play better, always sounds better, always at the end of the day, yeah, we did what we tried to do and it sounds cool.
So what sort of communication do you mean? Maybe I don't understand it completely. So what would some of...
Just like making sure that you have all your lyrics, that making sure you... communication meaning like that we all agree with how the arrangement of the song is going to go. I guess, like I said before, like being prepared and communicating what you believe in. Someone, you get in the studio, all of a sudden people's like, oh, I really want to, I want to edit all the drums or do every single drum individually. I don't want to do that. Like that's a waste of my time. That's not a cool thing to do. Not that's an extreme version, but making sure that that's not surprising to them. That's what I mean.
Right, that makes sense. That's a very good point actually. I'm gonna remember that. But so Seattle, because you're based in Seattle, you said.
Yeah.
Because I never really thought about how the music scene is there. Because obviously it's famous for back in the day, Nirvana. Is Pearl Jam from Seattle? Yeah. So how is it there today?
This city's gone through a huge shift in the last maybe, I don't know.
Has Amazon taken over, or? Oh, that's it?
Yeah, it has. The city has become much, much more expensive just to be in. a lot of studios haven't been affected because a lot of studio owners own their buildings, so they're not getting rate increases or rent increases, but bands are, and living expenses are much more expensive here than they used to be.
Right.
So there's just kind of less bands here. It's that I'm sure that'll change, but or I hope that changes. But yeah, the local music scene is smaller, certainly more competitive than it used to be. Just because it's expensive, hard for a band to exist here, hard for them to have a practice place.
Right.
It's still a small city in the big scale things, and so living costs being high for a small town makes it difficult for bands to be productive here. So that's changed kind of a lot.
But it's not more expensive than LA, is it?
It's damn near, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's very expensive. It's just a small city. When you have this online retailer in the world bringing in people from all around the world to work here, and they're all getting paid very well,
Right.
it makes prices go up. And it's just not a very big, so much smaller than Los Angeles for sure. So the prices are close, if not right there with them. Maybe not to buy something, but to rent something.
Mm-hmm. And Seattle, that's north of LA, right? Quite far up, is it?
Quite north, yeah. It's very top corner of the United States.
Ah, shit. That's cool, man. I'd like to go sometime, actually.
It's cool. It's a cool city.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah. That's cool. I mean, yeah, I've been lucky that I've been able to have success here making records where I'm from, where my family's from, and be able to make records in this town from a lot of local bands, not all local bands, but a lot of them here that were successful that allowed me to stay here. If that wasn't the case, if I didn't do Fleet Foxes or Father John Misty or Band of Horses or Biltzville or Modest Mouse or things of that nature from this area, if that wasn't a successful place to do that, I probably wouldn't live here.
Right.
But I was able to make them from here in studios here and get a foothold making records in this town. And it's not a thrilling city to live in, but it's a good city to live in. And, LA's 2 hours away by plane. And so it's, you go down there and you can go do that aspect of the music business easily and still have a relaxed, more, certainly, less stressful city to live in than cities like that. So I appreciate that. I also think because there are such good studios here, and I'm a big fan of artists getting out of their comfort zone to record, like going away from where they live so they're not, having some drama with a girlfriend or ex-boyfriend or going to the same bar that they probably go to too much. But they come here, they get an Airbnb or whatever their scenario is, and we hunker down to make a record, and that's really all they want to do as a band. And I have all the things, all my musical instruments that I have in the city, and ask, all the different outlets for getting equipment that I can get very easily here from all my friends and contacts. Having all that here, but having the band just really want to hunker down and only work is valuable. So I think that's like going to London to make the Bears Den record would have been just too expensive, and just the cost of living there is just too expensive, and studio time's too expensive. So getting them to come here in a much cheaper studio, even though they had to fly here and all that stuff, is still cheaper and more relaxing for them than being kind of stuck in Crouch End or wherever they're.
So they were actually from London then?
Yeah, they're from Crouch End.
I didn't know, right. So it was actually cheaper for them to fly to Seattle to do the record with you?
Yeah, I mean, it probably worked out to be half and half, I bet, at the end of the day, because the record took a little longer than we thought. Right. So I don't know. It would have been probably about the same at the end of the day. But initially, initially.
That must be awesome for a band to go to America.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're stoked. We're in the studio that I did, Fleet Foxes record in, and they're like super fans of that. And so that was exciting for them. And one of the guitar players, the guitar player Harry from Bears Den, is a huge Pearl Jam fan. So he was just kind of super stoked to be in Seattle, where his idols are from, and that was. Of course. So there's a lot to be said to getting away from your comfort zone and going to a whole different place and having a whole different experience and that's what you're there to do, is have that experience and make that record.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a valuable thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I know I would love it.
Sure.
I used to be in bands and stuff, and I would love to have gone to US to do a record. That would have been a dream.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Just before we wrap up here, where can people find more info about you, contact you for work, and all those sort of things?
Go to my website, phileck.com. That's the easy one. There's a link there to the GPS management. My management, contacted them. That's probably the two easiest ways to get a hold of me, is just my website and GPS's management website.
Oh, okay, cool. And actually, one last question. Your last name, Ek. How do you pronounce it?
Ek, yeah.
Is that
Ek.
any way Scandinavian?
It's just Swedish.
Oh yeah. Are you part Swedish?
Yeah, family Swedish descent.
Yeah, because I'm Swedish.
Yeah. I'm Ek. It's from Gothenburg area.
Yeah. Cool, man.
My mom's side of the family is Nelson. They're from I guess Uppland, I guess, is where they're from.
Do you speak any Swedish?
Not I don't. None of my immediate family does because we're probably at least three generations away from being there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I worked with, the band Shout Out Louds. You know that band?
Yeah, I think so.
Anyways, I did one of their records,
okay.
and they came here and recorded here in Seattle, and then we went to Stockholm and recorded there, and it was a funny talking point. Was my last name?
Yeah.
What is going on with your last name? It's a weird last name even in Sweden. So
yeah, exactly.
Pretty fun, yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, man, for coming on.
Yeah,
it was awesome talking to you.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil, for coming on. It was awesome talking to you, and I hope you, the listener, liked it too, and that you find some good and useful tips and information that you can use. Before we wrap up here, don't forget to leave a comment below, a like, subscribe, download your free guide again. 3 tested ways to increase your client base. Link below to that too. Pleasure, and I see you guys next week.